Nope.
You plug the light.
Okay, all right, okay, so we're recording and looks like we are live. Just make sure. Okay, and Ms. Dr. Hightower, I just want to just start by just kind of letting the audience know a little bit about you, and I'll just kind of introduce myself first. My name is Michael Dobson. I'm the president and CEO of the Dream Foundation, and we are an organization that operates statewide. We oversee the nation's first MLK license tag, and we work on a variety of issues in the state legislature. All those issues has to do with the legacy of Dr. King regarding voting, education, criminal justice reform, and all those issues that are core to his legacy. And what we're doing here today is we're trying to provide an opportunity for voters to know who their candidates are and know a little bit about their background and their desire to serve our cities, our counties, and our states. And today we want to introduce you to Dr. Pamela Hightower, who's a candidate for Leon County School Superintendent. And Dr. Hightower, if you can just give the audience and the voters just a little introduction into who you are, your background, and where you're from, and just where to spur this passion to serve as our school superintendent.
Thank you so much for having me. As he said earlier, I am Dr. Pam Hightower from Jefferson County, was born and raised in Jefferson County, been in Leon County for the past 40 years. I have served over 40 years in education. I am passionate about education, retired, and still feel that I have much to give. I'm a candidate because I see the need for change, and I know how to move this district forward. I want every child, regardless of their socioeconomic status, their zip code, their ethnicity, to have a high quality education. I think every child, all 34,000 of our students deserve that. What's that? Why am I qualified? I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in elementary education, a PhD in education leadership. As I said, I've served over 40 plus years in public education. I've experienced at every level. I've been a parent, a volunteer, a paraprofessional, that's a teacher's aide, a teacher, a primary specialist working with K through 3 teachers and students, an assistant principal, a principal at the school level. At the district level, I have served with the McKinney-Bento homeless program. That's for students who are homeless, either living in shelters or surf couching on somebody's couch, but don't have a permanent home. I've also served as a Title I and Special Services Director. And most recently, I've served as a consultant working with DNF schools. That's schools that have been graded by the state who are DNF schools. Mm-hmm. That is my career. I have served from, like I said, Killorn Lakes, where I started my career in Tallahassee. I did my internship at Appalachia Elementary. My first principal job was at Carolyn Bavard Elementary on Jackson Bluff, now Sales School. And I moved from there. When Wesson was an F school, I asked Superintendent Monfort to allow me to go to Wesson as a principal and take 6 of my staff members with me. And I was afforded that opportunity to go to Wesson. And from Wesson, I went to Bond. While we were at Wesson, we built the new Bond school and we merged those 2 schools together. As I said, I've had experiences turning low performing schools around, but I've also had experience working in schools like Killorn Lakes and working last year at Connolly with some teachers there. So my experience is not only in Title I school, but I find children wherever they are need the same thing, a nurturing and caring learning environment.
Okay, thank you so very much. And one of the things that the next school superintendent is possibly going to face and probably dealing with a little bit of it right now is some significant budget constraints A lot of it having to do with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, if we have a situation where the school budgets are cut by 5 to 10% because of reduced students or reduced funding, how do you anticipate dealing with that and make sure that we're delivering the quality of education in all the various sectors throughout the community?
Hello? Oh gosh, did I lose you? Did something happen?
Oh, so can you hear me?
No, I just lost.
I'm
Hello?
sorry.
Something happened to my computer. Okay, there we are. I'm sorry, we're back.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, I
Okay,
can.
well, I'll repeat that. What I was saying is that given COVID-19 and what we anticipate, it's going to be its impact on the school system, not only in this county but frankly around the country. And I'm wondering, what would you do if our budget is reduced by 5 to 10% because of the reduced students or reduced funding? And how are you going to deal with that and to make sure that we still have a quality education delivered to every sector of the community?
First of all, we're going to have to go in and analyze the budget, see what we have, what things we have in place for this year. We're going to have to see what we have in reserve. We're going to also have to prioritize our needs.
Mm-hmm.
We got to also make sure that we keep the classroom. We got to hold that harmless. Our classroom and our support of our classroom must be held harmless. So first, looking at our budget, prioritizing those things that we may be able to put off for some time, other than right now, analyzing where we are. And most importantly, I saw in the Democrat, we're missing about 2,000 students. We've got to find those students. That's a lot of money when already on an already stretched budget. So making sure we have those students in place by FTE, so we don't lose those FTEs for those students that we currently don't have in our district right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and thank you so much. And I have another question. Actually, it's one I didn't write down earlier,
Okay.
but it's something that I thought about when you talked about where you're from. You said you're from Jefferson County. I'm assuming, would that be Monticello?
That's correct.
Okay, a good friend of mine whom you might know, her name is Gwendolyn Sappho.
Yes.
Yeah, I met Gwen back a long time ago, back in Gainesville. And I know a little bit about the Northern County. And as you know, Jefferson County is kind of unique in that it's the first county, only county, I think, in Florida that is completely charter. And I'm just kind of, and I'm wondering what lessons does that fact teach you as a school superintendent coming in? What did you learn from that? What happening in Jefferson County that you can take with you as you improve certain schools?
Mr. Dobson, as we look at our schools and how we're going to improve those schools, we had several of our schools that were on the lowest 300 list, and stood a chance if those grades had not improved to go into a charter district. But we want to make sure that we are accountable and putting resources in place to make sure that that does not happen. We want to make sure that we're improving our school grades and putting all those resources in those schools, but whether it's human or fiscal resources, so that does not happen. Working very closely, that was going to happen to Weston in 2003, 2004, had that school grade not improved, and a couple of our other schools that we work with in Leon County. So we have to go in and make sure we analyze where we are, look at the data, put the human and fiscal resources in there that we need, progress monitor where our students and teachers are, give the teachers the support that they need, and make sure our students understand where they are and what we need them to do in order to perform, because we know that we have great students and we have great teachers and staff. Someone say, well, moving from a D to a C, that's not a lot. That is huge when you're dealing with the population, with all the other things that you have to deal with. So it takes leadership, it takes compassion, and it takes passion. But most of all, it takes a caring and supportive staff. And that's what we have. We have that in Leon County with our teachers and staff. So giving them the support that they need, and then supporting them so that we can make sure that we move those schools and they don't become charter schools that was taken over by charter. We know that charter schools are public schools as well, but we want to make sure that we maintain our Leon County schools under Leon County School Superintendent and the school board.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and and those are always challenging. That's such a unique thing in Monticello. We can have a long conversation about that because there's a private company that's doing it, and there's always politics involved in that stuff. Um, and I also want to ask you, how would you address the issue of teachers and employees who feel they're working in the schools right now compromises their health due to COVID-19, and that seemed to be a real concern. And also kind of a second part to that is this issue of and also related is this issue of teachers who've left the schools, and we're dealing with that, which caused a shortage. How do you see addressing that issue moving forward?
Unfortunately, that we had teachers who had to leave or resign because of compromised health issues. And I'm very sorry that that had to happen, but I would have looked at that from the onset. Well, what we have put in place to make sure we maintain those teachers. Some of them wanted to be able to teach from home, but continue working, but that was not afforded to them. That would have, possibly kept some of our teachers here. As I saw in the newspaper the other day, I think we're 24 teachers short and we're into the 4th week of school. So right now we're having students being taught by subs who are not trained on the system, and also those students were already behind, having been out for the last 6 weeks or 6 months or so, they're even further behind. So if we could have looked at putting in place to make sure those teachers who had compromised health issues or had dealing with family issues could have had the opportunity to been on the teaching from digital, it's possible we would have kept many of those teachers still here. So that's one thing I would have looked at a little bit differently than current superintendent is making sure, because the state did not require that we have all teachers come to brick and mortar, even though they were teaching distant learning. So working with those teachers to make sure that we could have met those needs and have them work at school, work at home, and maintain them in our building. And hopefully we wouldn't have had 24 positions the 4th week going into school.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I mean, and that issue, wow, that's quite a challenge that we're going to have to address. And and earlier when you introduce yourself and talk about your background, and so you have a very extensive background, in education. And to me, education is certainly a calling. And I'm just curious, what drove you to choose that calling? The calling chose you, or you chose it, or what is it about your background and your experience in life that really made you want to focus on education?
Education has always been important to me. I have 10 brothers and sisters, but my parents always made education important to us. Out of the 10 of us, I think we have 5 college graduates, the other ones who've gone either to trade school. So education was always important. In elementary school, I had a teacher, her name was Miss Naomi Cummings, and she was one of my best teachers. And she instilled in me the love for reading and learning. And I think when I finished college, I got to work with Miss Naomi Cummings at Jefferson Elementary School, and continue today. She's my church member, and still think she's my first grade teacher, by the way,
Oh,
because
really?
we're in that class. But she instilled a love for learning in me. And my father, as I said earlier in another interview, my dad did not learn to read until much later in life. When I graduated from college and I started teaching in the rural Jefferson County, I taught adult ed classes. And to my surprise, my daddy wanted to learn to read. So he came to my adult ed classes where I taught him to read. And so that's just reading and education has always been something that I've been passionate about. But seeing him wanting to read, it just made me even more want to educate boys and girls, because I didn't want students. He couldn't back then. He had to stop because he had to help his family, my grandfather and grandparents, those to take care of the family. So I wanted to afford every child an opportunity to have a quality education, so they would not be a 60-year-old man just coming to learn to read. But I was impressed with my dad's desire to read. Now, my dad didn't learn to read late in life, but he could do math like no one else. He could count, and math was his favorite thing, but he didn't learn to read. So that was important to me, teaching him to read and seeing an adult learn to read. If I could do that with an adult man who drove in a truck all day, left home at 5:30 in the morning, came back and came to my adult class, I know we can do the same thing for our boys and girls in our school districts.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you bring back some memories for me personally, actually, because I grew up in Bartow, Florida, and I lived on a street which I I fondly kind of call Teachers Row, because all my neighbors were, were teachers, or they were the high school football coach, or something like that. And back then, a lot of those teachers, they either went to Florida and they were got education in Florida A&M or Bethune-Cookman. That was a very different time. And at that time, particularly in the Black community, teachers were just held up as, just so high in the community, along with the preachers and
That's true.
I'm not sure how, but over the last 30, 40 years, seems to me that has changed a little. And then we have these issues in the African American community that we deal with, and we pick up our newspapers and we talk about, the shootings and et cetera. And I'm just trying to figure out, what can we do to, I know we can't go back 30 years, but what can we do to lift up the teaching profession in the community to help it be a major part of fixing those ills that exist in the African American community? I know that may sound like a complicated question, but I'm just curious. 'Cause I think that's very important in terms of the role that education and our teachers as individuals can play in the community.
First of all, and you're right, growing up, teachers and pastors played a huge role in our African American community. As a superintendent, I want to make sure that we bring our faith-based, our social services, our city, and our county together. We're all in this together. We're all trying to make sure that we have a safe, caring community for our students, for our citizens. And it's going to take the village in order to do this. It's going to take us all sitting down, looking at where we are. We've got to bring the church back into it, not from the sense of the church, but the pastors who have an impact. Mm-hmm. On Sunday morning, whenever we're able to get back into church, we have a captive audience there. And so we've got to talk about these things that's facing our communities. And as you say, growing up, that was who helped in my community. We went to the teachers. When my parents needed something, we were either the teachers or the pastors. And so we've got to get back to some of the things that we did before, and they work. We've got to go back and all these social services that we have, we got to tap into those services so we can bring those things home to our families, such as the mental health issues. A lot of our students, every issue, every situation, most of the situation, when you hear about some of these tragic things that have happened, someone will say, oh, I knew when he was in elementary school, I knew that was a problem. But if we knew that was a problem, what are we doing to identify those problems so that we don't get to the other end and we have something tragic to happen? So identifying those mental health challenges some of our students are facing and putting those resources in our communities to help address those, the trained counselors, going into the communities, providing these parent workshops, not at the school, but going to the church and providing. We did that as a Title I principal. We did it as a Title I director. We've got to go out into the community and provide these resources. We've got to go to the people. They're not coming to us. Let's go to them in their environment so that they can. I went over to 1010 Basin back 30 years ago when I was principal at Bond, Carolyn Bavard. We put a tent up. We had the grill out. We had the parents come there. We knocked on the doors. We did hot dogs and hamburgers, and we had talk, but they were in their comfort zone, and we could still meet and address the needs that we need for them. As you said, growing up in the rural, we may not have always gone to PTO meetings, but parent involvement at our home was very involved. You didn't do your work at home at school, and somebody called home and told your parents. They were very involved, and you went back the next day. You knew that you needed to sit and focus. So we got to get back to some of those things that we know work. And that is the community being involved, involving all of our stakeholders to make sure that we're educated. We say that it takes a village, but we got to not only say those words, we got to involve the village in doing this. When I turned around Western School, it was a village approach. It was Florida State, it was FAMU, it was socialists. All the people that we had, it was partners that stepped up and said, I heard that you were F school. What can we do to help? At Bond, I sent out a letter to every church in that community. I need your help. If it's no more than on Sunday to announce that your children need to get to school on time. They're getting to school at 9 o'clock, they've missed 30 minutes, they've missed an hour. So just that kind of involvement, we've got to collaborate, we've got to talk. Just sitting down talking, we can get a lot of things solved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're right, we have meetings and all this, and there's a lot of lip service, but kids are dying. There's a lot that's going on, and it's time to really to not talk, but to do, and to not talk about that village, but to have that village be an active one.
Mhm.
You know, and now another question I wanted to ask you is, as you've been in the school system for a while, and you remember the Jeb Bush years, how frankly, what he did working with his brother when he was in the White House, they changed, education instruction tremendously over the country. And we started doing what most people complain about, which is called teaching to the test. Many people complain about that. And I know there's all these discussions about core and other various approaches to educating our kids. And I'm wondering, as school superintendent, what's the biggest reform or reforms that you would like to bring to instruction itself, in terms of the instruction that the teachers are providing? Are there any reforms that you're thinking of, or that you're able to do within the structure that you're allowed to, based on what our legislature and our federal government, in some respects, are pushing down to the local school boards?
Well, as far as testing, that is not something we can control. If I could, I would love to make sure that my ideal situation would be that in August we give students a test, and in May we give them a test again, and we measure the success, expecting students to have made learning gains. That would be an ideal situation, because we're testing the children that we taught. Right now we give them a test in end of the year, and then we start the next year. We're basing on a year later's test. So we test them in August and expect them by the end of May, the end of school year, to have made learning gains. And we're judging apples to apples, but now we're not. But back to the question, what can we do as far as we took at the Common Core curriculum at the elementary level. We've got to make sure that we're putting human and physical resources in place to make sure we're addressing all the needs of all of our students. As I said, we've got to look at the data, what the data is telling us, and then we got to make sure that we're teaching so that our students are having an environment that they are learning. We're not teaching the test. We're teaching skills and strategies so that students will be able to cope with, regardless of whether they see 1 + 1, it's still going to always be 2. Whether it's on a test or wherever you sit, it's going to be 2. So teaching those strategies and skills so that those students can be successful in life. We've got to also, not only testing, all students are not going to college, so we've got to make sure that students are getting ready to be career ready. We have students who may not go to college. They may choose a career. So making sure we're also having that path with our students as well. We have students who are capable of excelling. So we should also make sure we have students who are able to excel. We have kids who may be able to graduate with 2 years of college, AA degree, if we track them in that department. So it's just making sure that we're working with families and affording them every opportunity we have, whether it's a career pathway, whether it's college bound, whether it's getting industry certification, whether it's international baccalaureate, whatever our students need, we got to make sure that we're looking at that. Likewise, we got to look at the beginning. We got to look at early childhood. We got to put programs in place, especially in some of our communities where our students are coming, liking that we're putting early childhood programs in. And someone asked, well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by using some of the vacant classrooms that we have, or repurposing some of the areas to increase our early childhood programs. We know that early literacy, early learning will improve us learning, but that's a long term. So what do we got to do now? Right now, with this learning gap that we already had before COVID, and now with this long time that we've had out of school, and then we're going back now, and a lot of families are having such a hard time online trying to master what we're doing now. So we've got to make sure that we're providing the support, be it parent workshops, additional resources at the schools. And I know with an already tight budget, but we cannot err on the side of the students. We got to make sure that we're keeping the classroom and the children harmless in all of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and thank you so much for that, because when you was talking about needing those additional resources and the fact that there's so much focus on virtual learning, and some families and some communities are really not equipped and able, and I think it's going to require additional partnerships that the school's going to have. with maybe the local government and maybe even some nonprofit organizations. Now, on this issue of disparities, I was listening, and you may hate that I'm bringing his name in this, but I was listening to an interview that Commissioner Curtis Richardson was doing, and Curtis, he and I are good friends, and he worked in the legislature, and he sat on education committees, and he said that there was no real disparity, if you will, in terms of how the schools were being funded. In other words, that the schools were being funded the same way, regardless of zip code. And I think a lot of people don't feel that that's the case. I wonder if you can kind of talk about how can we either deal with those disparities if they exist, and if they don't exist, how can we structure a system so that there appear to be equality among the various zip codes when it comes to education.
Schools are funded, all schools are funded based on the FTEs for the schools and the number of students in the schools. So they get funding, the funding is the same. They all are basically funded the same. But the problem lies that if you in a school where you have a high poverty, low income students, or you have students who are not reading below grade level, or so many, we have about 40% of our third graders in the district that are not reading on grade level. That's what our last FSA tells us. But in one school, you may have 50 or 60% as opposed to another school with only 10%. So if you give me equal amount, then that's still not equal because I have much more to deal with. So even though we're getting equal, we're not equal because we're not on the same playing ground. So we need above and beyond. And yes, those schools do get Title I federal dollars, which is supposed to make sure they help to close some of the achievement gap with those Title I and federal dollars. So that's another way that we can look at that. But even with those dollars, sometimes it's still not enough. We need additional and above and beyond. In a school that I worked in, we talked about, we had 98% of my students were on free and reduced lunch. Now, that's not saying that they can't learn, because that's the case. I wouldn't be sitting before you today with a PhD in educational leadership running for superintendent, because I was on free and reduced lunch. So that, I'm not saying that they can't learn, but they come with a whole lot of different issues that we have to deal with. So that's the problem. Giving us equal, but it's not equitable. So we need to make sure we're giving equitable services. That means based on the number of students that we have. We have so many more students with so many more issues, be it social, emotional, whatever, academic issues. So even though the gap is 40% at third grade, you've got to look at those schools where have a high level of students who are not performing on grade level to make sure we're providing equitable services to them, not equal, but equitable services.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Now, and I'm asking you a question now, kind of going to get to a little, well, somewhat politics, if you will. You are running in a race, against an incumbent, and voters are going to want to know, okay, well, why should I vote for her, over him? What would you say to voters that it's going to be the change that they can expect, in which you feel that the current superintendent has been challenged with?
I would say that my experience, my passion sets me apart. My boots on the ground. I've been in the classrooms. I've been up close and personal. I've talked with the teachers. I'm an instructional leader. I understand curriculum and instruction. I understand progress monitoring. I understand that it takes a village. I understand it takes all of us working together. I am a proactive rather than a reactive leader. I will have a plan in place going in. We will look at where we are, and we will develop a plan with all of our stakeholders. I will be collaborative in my planning, including the teachers, including the principals, including the parents in our decision making, so we don't have to go back and make the changes or apologize for changes of things that we put in place because we thought up front. We've been proactive rather than reactive. You can count on me to make sure that we're including all of our stakeholders, and that when the plan is, we always have to tweak, and nothing is perfect. No one is perfect, but we would have done the best job that we possibly can to be inclusive, to make sure that we're listening to everyone. And then when the plan is put out, that we've had buy-in from it, so that when teachers buy in, when parents buy in, then we own that. We know where we are. We know that we are a B school. If we want to be an A school, it's going to take us doing this, this, and this. We're going to put in checkpoints along the way. I want to put a report card out there. Grade me on it. I said the other night, we give kids report cards. Let's grade me as a superintendent. How am I doing? Am I doing what I said I was going to do? So grade me. Make sure that you're holding me accountable, just like we want to hold the teachers accountable. I will listen. I will be responsive, and I will communicate in a timely fashion. And I will make learning my top priority. I will make teachers and employees my top priority, because happy teachers, happy employees make happy schools. Happy parents make happy schools. So I know that if we're going to do this, we've got to improve the morale from our bus drivers that pick our students up, to our painters, to our maintenance workers, to our cafeteria workers, to our teachers, to our paraprofessionals, and our administrators. As I said, we have some of the best staff anywhere. I'll put them up against anyone. We just need to sit them down and let's listen to what they're telling us. And then when they tell us, we need to develop a plan. And like I say, react. We've got to show our appreciation. Right now, they're feeling devalued. How do we make them feel valued? We've got to go in. Sometimes all it takes is listen, thank you. We've got to put, I said the other day, I don't think there's anyone in this nation that does not understand the valuable role that an educator plays, having to be parent, grandparent, cafeteria person. Now when our kids had to go home on a dime's notice, and we had to turn from being a grandmama to now being the teacher that trying to maneuver the canvas and maneuver computers, when we didn't have that to do before, because we had educators and teachers who did that. So I think now going back and making sure that our teachers and our parents and our that are showing appreciation to our teachers and our staff in a way that we've never done that before. And sometimes it just takes a note. People just want to know that they're being listened to and they're heard and they're valued.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that answer. And I was, making some notes, as you were giving me that answer, and I just kind of, underline some words when you talk about being proactive rather than reactive, and when you talked about there's a feeling of from the teachers that they're being devalued, and then there's, you mentioned the verb morale, like thereof, and then you talked about essentially what I kind of circled here for the teachers, and I really appreciate that, because it looks like you're not just running for this office for the children and the community, but for the teachers as well, because you've been a teacher for a long time, and it means a lot to you, and I really appreciate that. Now, I want to kind of end with a couple of questions, actually, and I want to end by asking you, in terms of the budget constraints and things that we have now, do you anticipate that there's going to be any additional growth in Leon County schools, or any planning for any growth? Or another side of that coin is because of economic downturns, do you see any possibility that we may have to revisit some things about how the schools are being laid out around the county?
Yes, I do think that if we have a significant budget cut, as I said earlier, we're going to have to go in and prioritize some things. We may have to go back and look at delaying some things. I know I listened to the school board meeting. I didn't, one of the meetings, there are no construction items out there right now. So that's a big one. But making sure only the things that have to be addressed are those things that are safe to the life situation. That must be, you got a leaking roof, or you got an air conditioner, those things have got to be taken care of. But making sure that we're prioritizing and looking at those things. If the budget cut comes in, as I said earlier, we got to also make sure that we have to look at our reserve. That's what reserve is for, to make sure. That's why we have to keep a certain percentage on the reserve, and that's what the reserve is for, to make sure that we are keeping the classroom and the classroom harmless in this. Because students, we only exist because of children. Schools are here because of children. We are here to educate children. As a superintendent, that is our #1 priority, is educating our children and making sure they're learning, and our teachers and everyone is working in safe and learning environment. We got to look at all of our budgets, our federal budgets. We got to look at the state budgets. So just now, all of our budgets, we're going to have to take a look at them and see where we can make changes and where we can cut things that we can make sure that our students will continue to learn. And we're closing this achievement gap that has existed for a long time, and even more now that we've been out so long that COVID has had. COVID did not create a problem. It unmasked some things for us. It unmasked the digital divide that we've known about. I've known about as a Title I principal. It unmasked some of the mental health issues that I've known about because we're out there, we see those every day. So those things didn't happen because of COVID. It just happened to unmask that so that we all can see that. It didn't mask the problem that we have with our students who are living in homeless shelters and not having the resources that they need, or our ESC students or English language learners. Those things just became unmasked so that now everyone is aware of those things, and we have put a focus on that, a face to that, people for that. So that's what COVID has done. It didn't create it, it just unmasked it so that we're all aware of those now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and thank you so much. And back to something you said earlier about proactive rather than reactive, and it kind of makes me think about what I think everyone saw was a reaction with respect to COVID-19, and there was kind of a back and forth that was going on that didn't appear steady and thought through and prepared for. But then again, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult for anyone to prepare for this pandemic. But I'm wondering, moving forward, whoever this next superintendent is going to be, they're going to be a superintendent in the midst of what's going to be called our coming out of COVID-19 and whatever that new normal is going to be. And how do you see you moving our district out of COVID-19 and also the issue of athletic programs and all the other programs that are involved? It's such a global problem, and I'm talking about the small global in terms of our school system and all the moving parts. How do you see yourself doing things moving forward that's going to keep our community safe, and also make sure that education is playing the key role that it should be playing in our lives?
First of all, we're going to follow the guidelines of the CDC. Mm-hmm. We must follow the guidelines of the CDC and sciences. We got to make sure that our students and our staff and our citizens are safe. That's the first thing we're going to have to do. We're going to need to make sure that we're surveying. The first thing I would do when I go in as your superintendent is to see where we are. Where our current plan that we have in place, where are we at with that plan? Talking to our stakeholders, what tweaks do we need to make in that plan to make sure that we're in a safe place, that we're in a good place? As I said, the CDC guide should guide what we're doing. I know our students need sports. I would love, my husband was a coach in high school, was a baseball coach. He is a PE teacher, so sports is very important. Both of my sons played sports, so it is very important. But I think that we have to always err on the side of safety and health. And when it is safe to do so, I want our students back out playing sport because I think it's important. I want them in school because that's where they learn best. But we've got to make sure that we're erring on the side of safety and caution. We've lost 3 people in our Leon County to COVID. Last week, a friend of my church member, we're burying another person who died yesterday morning in Jefferson County. This is real. I decided to run for superintendent prior to COVID because of all the reasons, because of closing the achievement gap, increasing the graduation rate. Those things are important. Expanding the pre-K program, providing staff development for our teachers, making sure we have mental health, making sure that we have a safe environment. Those are my reasons for running. Being transparent, increasing our parent and community engagement, reducing our out-of-school suspension. Those are things that are important to me before that. So that's why I'm running. That COVID, we're going to have to live through and make sure that we are putting the best plan in place. But a plan is only as good as the people who put it in the involvement we had. I said, when we go back and look at it, if we've got to make those tweaks, we got to make sure that we're tweaking those and we're erring on the side of caution for the students and the families and everyone, all of our stakeholders. As far as athletics, FHSSA has guidelines, and we have to follow those guidelines as well. So it's not, we all have, I can tell my people, we all have a boss, someone that's over us. So whether it's the FHSA or the superintendent or the governor or the president, we all have guidelines that we have to follow. But when we're following those guidelines, we got to make sure that we know we are dealing with humans and families, and we're always cautious, cautious of that. And the decisions that we make, got to make sure that it's in the best interest of the students, that as a superintendent, that is, we are elected to serve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. And I think I may just have one more question, unless something pops in my mind, I don't know. But I wanted to ask you, and you and I talked briefly the other day, and I got a sense of what your core values are and what's important to you. And I know family is important to you. And I wanted to ask you just on those subjects about who Dr. Pamela Hightower is, and what drives you, and your values are, and also what is it? What is something about you that people would be surprised to know about?
I think I'm pretty much an open book. Been around for 40 years. I'm an open book. I would just say my faith, my family. Those are very important to me. My compassion, my drive. My mom and my dad taught me, if you're going to do something, give it all you got. Do it well or don't do it at all. And that's the way I'm going into the superintendent's race, into the superintendent's office, is do it well and do it or don't do it at all. They told us, when you do something, do it right the first time so you don't have to do it. So my determination and my commitment to excellence, my high expectations for myself that I set for myself, for my students, for my teachers, and that's who I am. No one rises to low expectations. So we set the bar high, and then we expect people to rise up to that. And I think when we do that, people understand, and I know where we have to go. So if I say that we want to be an A district, then what are we going to have to take for us to get there? And there is nothing, anyone who's worked with you will tell you, there's nothing that I think I'm above doing, whether it's cleaning the cafeteria, whether it's sweeping the floors or cleaning the bathroom, whatever it takes to make a school district move, that's what we've got to be committed to doing. We've got to do that from Kalaran Lakes, from Childs now, to Woodville, from Fort Braden, to Chairs, and everybody in between. We're all in this together. Every student, every staff member, every employee in here. Is the superintendent's responsibility to make sure that we lead with integrity, open and honest communication. And that's what I want to lead with. I want to lead with integrity. I want to lead with being passionate and showing my commitment and determination to excellence. And I think when we do that, we all rise.
Okay, and I was going to end, but I will end with just one more question. You and I talked, and I talked about how every kid, when they leave the hospital in their birth, every kid's equal. And what changes is just maybe the socioeconomic situations that they find themselves in. As a society, what we try and do is to lift all boats. Regardless of any of that, and family is just so important. We can best strengthen families, and I'm wondering, how can schools be more helpful to families to make sure that they're being able to realize what they want, for their kids. And all parents are loving parents and want the same things. We just need systems in place to deal with those places where there are gaps. And what do you see what can the schools be doing different or better? And what would be its role in helping families who are trying to make sure that their kids get the best that they can out of their future?
I think there are several things that we can do. I think the first thing is, like I said, having the communication, meeting our parents where they are, making sure that they are comfortable coming to the school. If they're not comfortable coming to the school, that we're going to them and we're providing those workshops, and we're providing family engagement activities. We're providing the information so that they can be aware what they have, what programs exist out there for their children. As I shared with you the other day, I said when kids are at school, they get to school, high school, between 7 o'clock, some of them are there till 6 o'clock, depending on their sports or whatever. They go home, they do homework, and they're in bed. The waking hours of the day, they're with the teachers at school. So teachers provide that. When you go back and ask someone who made the most impression, most of the time it's a teacher. Many of the time it's a teacher that has had a great impact on us. So we've got to make sure that we are putting who we are putting in front of our children. It does matter. It matters from the leadership to everyone in between. But the most important that we talk about is a teacher. We got to talk about values and high quality education as it relates to our economic future. I talked with a young lady who is buying her house for the first time. I want to look at that. I want to make sure we're putting programs in place to help families to move into home, become homeowners. How do we do that? By educating families. This is how you be a homeowner. You got to get credit right. You got to do these things. So there are other things other than educating the students, but educating the whole family so that they can move out of some of those impoverished situations that they're in by doing the workshops and helping them to repair their credit, helping them to do those kind of things. That's not only going to change our school, but it's going to change our district, it's going to change our county as we move and looking at the violence and the impoverished situations that many of our students are on. So it's educating the whole family, doing those workshops and those trainings in our communities that our families and our churches that can help us and embrace some of those things in our community to change some of those things that our families are facing.
Thank you so very much. I really, personally, I like that. I like that idea of educating the whole family. And that's what we should have been doing all along. And I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me and to talk with the voters today, who's been able to listen in, and we'll be circulating this on Facebook and also on YouTube, and I wish you well in this election, and Leon County would be blessed to have you, and I look forward to chatting with you again. And
thank you so much for having me.
Okay, and thank you, and God bless, and you have a good rest of your day.
I thank you so much.
Okay.
Don't forget, November 3rd. November 3rd is election day. When you go to the polls, remember Pam Hightower, Superintendent of Leon County Schools. And if you're early voting, make sure that we get those ballots back in. And again, I want to thank you for having me. As I said earlier, we're living in some unprecedented times where leadership skills, decision-making, compassion, and passion is imperative. I'm the leader that possess those qualities. One of the most important qualities a superintendent can have is making sure that all of our students are learning and teachers in a safe environment. And that's what I propose to bring to the table. Thank you again.
And what is your website? How can they contact you?
hightowercampaign.org.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you so very much.
Thank you again.
Okay, you take care now.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.